Hey everyone, welcome to Midnight Mystic Stories. I noticed a lot of you who are watching and enjoying the content aren't subscribed yet. If you love spine-chilling stories, creepy encounters, and unexplained mysteries, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow and helps us keep bringing more of the content you love. And be sure to comment below where you are tuning in from. Thank you and enjoy the video. I met him at a coffee shop. Predictable, I know. I was hunched over my laptop, frantically trying to finish a grant proposal, fueled by lukewarm coffee and sheer desperation. He approached my table with a hesitant smile, apologizing for interrupting, saying he admired my intense focus. Classic meet cute, right? His name was Julian, and he was, admittedly, incredibly charming. He had this effortless way of talking, like he was genuinely interested in everything I had to say. Even my rambling explanations of fungal networks and mycorrhizal symbiosis. He was an architect, he told me, passionate about sustainable design, and he had these piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through me. I was instantly smitten. Looking back, the first red flag was probably how quickly things moved. After that initial coffee shop encounter, we started texting constantly. He'd send me good morning messages, ask about my day, tell me about his projects. It was flattering. Intoxicating even, especially after a string of dating app disappointments where conversations rarely lasted more than a few exchanges. He called me beautiful, intelligent, fascinating, words I hadn't heard directed at me in a long time. Within a week, we were going on dates almost every night. Romantic dinners, walks along the river, even a spontaneous weekend trip to a secluded cabin in the mountains. It felt like a whirlwind romance, a movie montage come to life. My friends, of course, were skeptical. It's moving too fast, they warned. Be careful. But I brushed their concerns aside. I was happy, genuinely happy, for the first time in ages. I figured they were just jealous, maybe a little bitter about their own dating woes. I was so caught up in the fairy tale that I ignored the nagging voice in the back of my head, the one whispering that something felt off. Julian was incredibly attentive, almost to a fault. He remembered every little detail I told him, from my favorite childhood book to my preferred brand of tea. He'd surprise me with thoughtful gifts, like a rare edition of that childhood book or a selection of exotic teas he'd found at a specialty store. He seemed to anticipate my needs before I even voiced them. It was incredibly romantic, but also a little unsettling. Like he was studying me, cataloging my every preference, every vulnerability. He also started isolating me, subtly at first. He'd make little comments about my friends, suggesting they were negative or didn't truly understand me. He'd conveniently schedule dates during times I usually spent with them, making it harder for me to see them. Eventually, I found myself spending almost all my free time with him, neglecting my friendships and hobbies. I didn't realize I was being manipulated, that he was deliberately cutting me off from my support system. The control intensified over time. He began questioning my choices, my clothes, my career aspirations. He'd offer helpful suggestions, subtly undermining my confidence and making me doubt myself. He'd criticize my work, telling me I was wasting my potential on something so insignificant. He'd pressure me to dress differently, to act differently, to be the person he wanted me to be. I started changing myself to please him, sacrificing my own identity in the process. The cabin trip was when things started to unravel, though I didn't realize it at the time. The cabin was beautiful, secluded deep in the woods, miles from civilization. There was no cell service, no internet, just us and the silence of the forest. It was supposed to be a romantic getaway, a chance to reconnect and escape the pressures of everyday life. But something felt different, a subtle shift in Julian's demeanor. He became more possessive, more demanding. He didn't want me to leave his sight, insisting we spend every moment together. He'd get agitated if I even glanced at my phone, accusing me of not being present. He started drinking heavily, and his mood would swing wildly from affectionate to angry. One night, after a particularly tense dinner, he accused me of flirting with the waitress at the local diner we had gone to earlier. The waitress was at least 60. I tried to laugh it off, but he wouldn't let it go. He kept berating me, his voice growing louder and more menacing. I tried to calm him down, but he just pushed me away, his eyes filled with a cold, unfamiliar rage. I went to bed early, hoping he'd calm down and we could talk in the morning. But he followed me to the bedroom, continuing his tirade. He cornered me, his body blocking the doorway, his voice a low, menacing growl. I started to feel genuinely scared, my heart pounding in my chest. I realized then that this wasn't just a bad mood, that something was seriously wrong. He had completely changed. I managed to defuse the situation by apologizing, even though I hadn't done anything wrong. I told him I loved him, that I would never do anything to hurt him. He seemed to calm down slightly, but the look in his eyes remained cold and distant. He crawled into bed beside me, but I couldn't sleep. I lay awake all night, listening to his breathing, my mind racing with fear and uncertainty. The next morning, he acted like nothing had happened. He was back to his charming, attentive self, showering me with affection and apologies. He blamed his behavior on the alcohol, promising it would never happen again. I wanted to believe him, but the fear lingered. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had seen a glimpse of his true self, a dark side he had been carefully concealing. The drive back to the city was tense and silent. I spent the entire time staring out the window, replaying the events of the night before in my head. I started noticing other things I had overlooked, the subtle manipulations, the controlling behavior, the red flags I had ignored. It all suddenly clicked into place, like a puzzle finally being solved. I didn't realize the danger I was in until I started planning my escape. I knew I had to get away from him, but I didn't know how. He had effectively isolated me from my friends and family, and I was afraid of what he might do if I tried to leave. I started secretly reaching out to my friends, explaining what had been happening and asking for their help. They were shocked and horrified, offering their full support. We devised a plan. They would pack my belongings while I was at work, and I would meet them at a prearranged location after I finished my shift. I was terrified he would find out, but I knew I had to take the risk. The day I left was the longest and most agonizing day of my life. I was constantly on edge, expecting him to appear at any moment. I pretended everything was normal, forcing myself to smile and engage in small talk. When I finally left work, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. I drove to the meeting spot, my heart pounding in my chest. My friends were waiting for me, their faces filled with relief. We hugged tightly, and I felt a wave of emotion wash over me. I was safe, but the ordeal wasn't over. Julian didn't take my leaving well. He started bombarding me with calls and texts, begging me to come back. When I ignored him, he started showing up at my apartment, banging on the door and shouting my name. He even contacted my workplace, spreading lies and rumors about me. I had to get a restraining order to keep him away. The process was exhausting and emotionally draining, but it was necessary. I slowly started rebuilding my life, reconnecting with my friends, pursuing my hobbies, and rediscovering my own identity. It took a long time to heal, to trust again, to feel safe. I still have moments of fear and anxiety, but I'm stronger now. I've learned to recognize the red flags, to trust my instincts, and to prioritize my own safety and well-being. I'll never forget what happened, but I refuse to let it define me. I am a survivor, and I will not be silenced. I never thought this would happen to me, but here I am, a cautionary tale for anyone who thinks they can outsmart the dating app algorithms or spot a catfish a mile away. I'd always considered myself pretty savvy, especially when it came to the internet. I mean, I grew up with it, right? I knew the red flags, the common scams, the overly filtered photos that were clearly 5 years old. I was confident, maybe even a little cocky, about my ability to navigate the treacherous waters of online dating. Then I met Alex. It started innocently enough, on Bumble. I'd been on the app for a few months, going on a string of mediocre dates with guys who were either aggressively boring or trying way too hard to impress me. I was starting to feel like maybe I was destined to be single forever, or at least until I spontaneously combusted from sheer frustration. Then I saw his profile. Alex. He was tall, or at least he looked tall in the pictures. He had this tousled dark hair and a smile that seemed genuinely kind. His bio was short and sweet, something about being a writer who loved hiking and good coffee. It wasn't trying too hard, it wasn't overly cliché, and it wasn't filled with shirtless gym selfies. It was normal, refreshing even. So I swiped right, and to my surprise, we matched. He messaged me almost immediately, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. We talked about our favorite books, our dream travel destinations, and our mutual love for obscure indie bands. He was witty, intelligent, and genuinely interested in what I had to say. It felt like I'd finally found someone who actually got me. Someone who wasn't just trying to get into my pants or impress me with their supposed accomplishments. We texted for a few weeks before deciding to meet in person. He suggested a small, cozy bookstore cafe downtown. It seemed like the perfect first date spot. The kind of place where you could actually have a conversation without having to scream over loud music. I was excited, maybe even a little nervous. I hadn't felt this way about someone in a long time. When I arrived at the cafe, I spotted him sitting at a table near the window. He looked even better in person than he did in his pictures. He stood up when he saw me, smiled that same genuine smile, and gave me a warm hug. The date was amazing. We talked for hours, completely losing track of time. We discovered even more shared interests, and the conversation just kept flowing. There were no awkward silences, no forced jokes, no trying to impress each other. It just felt easy. Over the next few weeks, we went on several more dates. We hiked in the mountains, explored hidden cafes, and spent evenings curled up on the couch watching old movies. He was everything I'd ever wanted in a partner. Kind, intelligent, funny, and genuinely caring. I was falling hard, and I didn't care who knew it. But then things started to get weird. It started with small things. He'd sometimes cancel plans at the last minute, citing work emergencies or family issues. He was always apologetic, and I never had any reason to doubt him, but it started to happen more frequently. Then he started becoming increasingly secretive about his phone. He'd always turn it face down when we were together, and he'd get visibly agitated if I even glanced at it. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was being paranoid, but the feeling of unease lingered. The biggest red flag came when I suggested meeting his friends. He always dodged the question, saying he wasn't really close to anyone in the city or that his friends were all out of town. It seemed strange, especially since he claimed to have lived here for several years. I started to wonder if he was hiding something, but I couldn't bring myself to confront him. I was too afraid of ruining what we had. One night, I was at his apartment, waiting for him to get back from work. He'd said he had to work late, but I was planning on surprising him with dinner. I had a key to his place, so I let myself in and started preparing the meal. While I was waiting for the pasta to cook, I decided to snoop. I know it was wrong, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I started with his desk. It was surprisingly organized, with neatly stacked papers and a few framed photos. The photos were mostly landscapes, nothing personal. Then I opened his laptop. It was password protected, but I decided to try a few guesses. I started with his name, then his birthday, then finally, a combination of both. To my surprise, it worked. I hesitated for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew I shouldn't be doing this, but the curiosity was overwhelming. I clicked through his files, hoping to find some kind of explanation for his behavior. Most of the files were work-related, documents and articles about writing. But then I found a folder labeled Personal. Inside the folder, there were dozens of photos. Photos of me. Photos taken without my knowledge. Photos of me walking down the street, sitting in cafes. Even photos of me inside my own apartment. I felt a chill run down my spine. He had been stalking me. But that wasn't the worst part. As I scrolled through the photos, I noticed something else. In some of the pictures, there was another person. A woman. A woman who looked strikingly similar to me. It took me a few moments to realize who it was. It was me, but older. Significantly older. I clicked on one of the photos to zoom in, and that's when I saw it. The woman in the photo was wearing a wedding ring. A wedding ring that looked exactly like the one my grandmother had given me before she died. A ring that I hadn't worn in years. I scrolled to more photos, and the pieces started to fall into place. The woman in the photos was not just someone who looked like me. It was me. A future version of me. And Alex. Alex was someone from my future. I don't know how it was possible, but I knew it was true. The way he knew so much about me. The way he seemed to anticipate my every thought and feeling. It all made sense now. He wasn't just a writer who loved hiking and good coffee. He was a time traveler who had come back to the past to what? I had no idea. I slammed the laptop shut, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I had to get out of there. I grabbed my purse and ran out of the apartment, leaving the dinner burning on the stove. I didn't stop running until I reached my own apartment, collapsing onto the couch in a state of shock. I spent the next few days in a daze, trying to make sense of what I had discovered. I couldn't tell anyone. They'd think I was crazy. But I couldn't ignore it either. I knew I had to confront him, but I was terrified of what he might do. Finally, I decided to meet him one last time. I texted him, asking if we could talk. He agreed, suggesting the same bookstore cafe where we had our first date. When I arrived, he was already there, sitting at the same table near the window. He looked as handsome and kind as ever, but this time, I saw something different in his eyes, something cold and calculating. "I know," I said, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't say anything, just looked at me with a knowing smile. "I know you're from the future," I continued. "I know about the photos. I know about me." His smile faded and his eyes narrowed. "How did you find out?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. "It doesn't matter," I said. "What matters is why. Why are you here? What do you want?" He hesitated for a moment, then sighed. "It's complicated," he said. "But the truth is, I came back to prevent something from happening. Something terrible." "What is it?" I asked. "I can't tell you," he said. "It would change everything. It would create a paradox." "A paradox?" I scoffed. "You're already messing with time. What's one more paradox?" He shook his head. "You don't understand," he said. "Some things are better left unknown." "No," I said. "I deserve to know. I deserve to know why you've been stalking me, why you've been lying to me, why you've been manipulating me." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and regret. "I never meant to hurt you," he said. "I truly care about you, but I can't tell you the truth. It's too dangerous." "Then get out of my life," I said, standing up. "I don't want anything to do with you. I don't want anything to do with your secrets, your lies, or your time travel." I turned and walked away, leaving him sitting alone at the table. I never saw him again. I don't know what he was trying to prevent, and I don't know what the future holds. But I do know that I'll never trust a dating app again, and I'll definitely never snoop in someone's laptop. Some things are better left unknown, even if it means living with the uncertainty, because sometimes the truth is more terrifying than anything you could ever imagine. My heart still races when I remember the dating app message that started it all. It wasn't even anything special, just a generic, "Hey, how's it going?" from a guy named Alex_88. But something about his profile picture, a candid shot of him laughing with friends at a brewery, made me pause. He seemed normal, refreshingly so, after weeks of wading through shirtless gym selfies and guys who listed their net worth as a personality trait. I was fresh out of a messy breakup and hadn't really intended to jump back into the dating pool so quickly. My friends had convinced me it would be a good distraction, a way to remind myself that not all guys were emotionally stunted man-children. So, against my better judgment, I swiped right. We chatted for a few days, and Alex seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. He asked about my job, my hobbies, my favorite books. He even remembered the small details I mentioned in passing, which was honestly more than I could say for most of my previous dating app experiences. He was quick to respond, but not in an overwhelming way. He just seemed present. And I, perhaps foolishly, found myself drawn in. We decided to meet for coffee that weekend at a cafe near my apartment. I was nervous, of course. Dating apps always feel like a gamble. You never really know who you're going to get until you meet them in person. But as I walked into the cafe and spotted Alex sitting at a table by the window, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. He looked exactly like his pictures, tall, with kind eyes and a warm smile. The date went surprisingly well. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. We laughed, we debated. We even discovered a shared love for obscure indie films. He was charming, intelligent, and genuinely funny. It felt like I had known him for years, even though we had just met. By the end of the date, I was smitten. And when he walked me back to my apartment and leaned in for a kiss, I didn't hesitate. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. We went on dates almost every night. Dinners, concerts, museums. He introduced me to his friends, who were all equally kind and welcoming. He was attentive and affectionate, always making me feel like I was the most important person in the world. It was exactly what I had been craving after my previous relationship, which had been characterized by neglect and emotional distance. I fell hard and fast, but as the weeks turned into months, I started noticing little things that bothered me. Small inconsistencies in his stories, moments where he seemed to be holding something back. He was still affectionate, still attentive, but there was a subtle shift in his demeanor, a darkness that would occasionally flicker in his eyes, only to disappear as quickly as it came. I tried to brush it off. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was letting my past insecurities cloud my judgment. But the feeling persisted, a nagging sense that something wasn't quite right. One night, we were at his apartment, watching a movie. I went to the kitchen to grab some water, and as I was walking back to the living room, I overheard him talking on the phone. "No, I told you. I'm handling it," he said, his voice low and agitated. "Just give me a little more time." I froze in the doorway, my heart pounding in my chest. Who was he talking to? And what was he handling? He turned around and saw me standing there, his face immediately turning pale. He quickly ended the call, his eyes darting around the room. "Who was that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He hesitated for a moment, then forced a smile. "Oh, it was just my mom," he said. "She was asking about my plans for Thanksgiving." I didn't believe him for a second. His mom lived in another state, and they rarely talked on the phone. But I didn't press it. I didn't want to start a fight. But from that moment on, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was lying to me. I started paying closer attention to his behavior, trying to piece together the puzzle. I noticed he was always vague about his job, never really going into detail about what he did. He was also incredibly secretive about his phone, always keeping it face down and never letting me see who was calling or texting him. One day, when he was in the shower, I couldn't resist the temptation. I picked up his phone and quickly scrolled through his recent calls. There was one number that appeared repeatedly, always labeled as unknown. I Googled the number, and it came back to a burner phone registered to a prepaid account. My stomach dropped. Who was he talking to on a burner phone? And why was he hiding it from me? I knew I had to confront him, but I was terrified of what I might find out. I spent the next few days agonizing over what to do, until I finally decided I couldn't live with the uncertainty any longer. I waited for him to come over to my apartment that evening, trying to act as normal as possible. We ordered pizza, watched a movie, and made small talk, but I could barely focus on anything he was saying. My mind was racing, trying to figure out how to broach the subject. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I took a deep breath and blurted it out. "Alex, who are you talking to on that burner phone?" His face turned white, and he stared at me in disbelief. "What are you talking about?" he stammered. "Don't lie to me," I said, my voice trembling. "I saw the number on your phone. Who is it?" He was silent for a moment, then let out a sigh. "It's complicated," he said. "Complicated how?" I pressed. He hesitated, then finally confessed. He was still married. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. All the pieces suddenly fell into place. The vague job, the secretive phone, the inconsistencies in his stories. It all made sense now. I was furious, heartbroken, and disgusted all at once. How could he do this to me? How could he lie to me so easily? I kicked him out of my apartment and told him never to contact me again. I spent the next few weeks and a days trying to process what had happened. I couldn't believe I had been so blind, so naive. I had fallen for his charm and ignored all the red flags, blinded by my own desire for love and affection. But the worst part was the feeling of violation, the sense that I had been used and manipulated. He had preyed on my vulnerability, taking advantage of my trust and turning it into a cruel joke. It took me a long time to heal from that experience. I went to therapy, leaned on my friends, and slowly started to rebuild my life. But even now, years later, the memory still haunts me. It serves as a constant reminder to be cautious, to trust my instincts, and to never ignore the red flags, no matter how charming someone may seem. I eventually got back into the dating scene, but it was never the same. I was always on guard, always suspicious, always waiting for the other shoe to drop. It's a sad reality, but that experience changed me forever. It taught me that sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who seem the most normal, the ones who know how to play on your emotions and exploit your vulnerabilities. And to think, it all started with a simple message on a dating app. "Hey, how's it going?" My heart still races when I remember just how close I was to a life forever changed by a simple right swipe. It makes me wonder how many other Alex_88s are out there, lurking in the digital shadows, waiting to prey on unsuspecting hearts. Okay, so, picture this. Me, perpetually single, finally deciding to dip my toes back into the cesspool that is online dating. I'd sworn it off like, A million times, after one too many catfish situations and conversations that fizzled out faster than a wet firework. But my friend Sarah convinced me. She's all, "You gotta put yourself out there. Mr. Right isn't gonna knock on your door while you're binge-watching true crime documentaries in your pajamas." Fine. She had a point. So, I dusted off my old profile, updated the photos, strategically cropped to hide my questionable quarantine habits, and dove back in. Bumble, Hinge, Tinder, the whole shebang. It was the usual parade of gym selfies, fish pictures, why is this still a thing, and guys who apparently skipped a memo about writing more than hey. But then I matched with Liam. Liam was different. His profile was actually witty. His photos were genuinely good. No fish, thank God. And he seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. We talked for hours the first night, bonding over our shared love of obscure indie movies and disdain for pineapple on pizza. He was smart, funny, and dare I say, charming. I was cautiously optimistic. We met up a few days later for coffee, and the chemistry was even better in person. He was even more attractive than his photos, always a plus, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. We laughed, we flirted, we even accidentally touched hands a couple of times. It was like something out of a rom-com. I actually started to think, okay, maybe this is it. Maybe I've finally found a decent guy. We went on a few more dates, a museum, a concert, a picnic in the park. Each time, I liked him more and more. He was attentive, respectful, and genuinely seemed to enjoy my company. He even remembered the small details I'd mentioned in passing, like my favorite coffee shop or my aversion to olives. It was almost too good to be true. That's when the little things started. Subtle things, almost unnoticeable, like the way he always seemed to know where I was, even when I hadn't told him, or the times he'd reference conversations we'd had online weeks ago. Details I'd completely forgotten. The first time it happened, I brushed it off. Maybe he just had a really good memory. But then it kept happening. He'd mention a book I was reading, even though I hadn't told him the title. He'd know the exact time I'd left work, even though I hadn't texted him. He'd bring up things I'd only mentioned in passing to my friends, things I definitely hadn't told him. It was like he was always watching me. I started feeling uneasy, like I was being followed. I'd catch glimpses of a familiar figure in the periphery, or hear a certain car engine as I walked home from work. But every time I turned to look, there was nothing there. I started chalking it up to stress. I was working long hours, dealing with a family situation, and yeah, maybe I was a little paranoid after watching one too many true crime shows. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that Liam was just a really good guy who happened to be observant. But the feeling wouldn't go away. One night, I was talking to Sarah about it. I'd been hesitant to tell her, not wanting to sound crazy, but the anxiety was eating me alive. He just seems to know too much, you know. I said, pacing around her apartment. It's like he's inside my head. Sarah listened patiently, her brow furrowed. Okay, that is a little weird, she admitted. But maybe you're just overthinking it. Have you tried talking to him about it? No, I said. I don't want to freak him out. What if I'm just being paranoid? Well, maybe you are, she said. But it's better to be safe than sorry. Just bring it up casually. See how he reacts. I knew she was right. I had to say something. The next time I saw Liam, I tried to bring it up as nonchalantly as possible. We were having dinner at my favorite Italian restaurant, and I decided to test the waters. So, I said, taking a sip of wine, you always seem to know so much about me. It's kind of impressive. He smiled, that charming, disarming smile that always made my heart flutter. I just pay attention, he said. You're a fascinating person. I like learning about you. Yeah, but it's more than that. I pressed, trying to keep my voice light. Like, you knew I was reading The Secret History before I even told you. How did you know that? His smile faltered for a split second, and I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Something cold, something calculating. Oh, I don't know, he said, recovering quickly. I probably just saw it on your bookshelf when I came over last week. That was a lie. He hadn't been inside my apartment in weeks. The blood drained from my face. I suddenly felt cold, despite the warm restaurant. I knew, in that moment, that my paranoia wasn't unfounded. Something was definitely wrong. You weren't at my apartment last week, I said, my voice barely a whisper. His smile vanished completely. His eyes hardened, and his posture changed. He was no longer the charming, attentive guy I'd fallen for. He was someone else entirely. "What are you talking about?" he said, his voice low and menacing. "Don't play dumb," I said, my heart pounding in my chest. "I know you've been following me. I know you've been watching me." He leaned forward, his eyes boring into mine. "You're being ridiculous," he said. "You're letting your imagination run wild." "Am I?" I said. "Then how did you know about the book? How did you know what time I left work? How did you know about the conversation I had with Sarah?" He didn't answer. He just stared at me, his face a mask of cold fury. I stood up, knocking over my chair in the process. "I'm done," I said, my voice shaking. "Stay away from me." I turned and ran, not stopping until I was safely inside my apartment. I locked the door, bolted it, and closed all the blinds. I was terrified. I spent the next few days in a state of constant anxiety. I barely slept, jumping at every sound. I avoided going out, afraid of running into Liam. I felt like I was being watched, even inside my own apartment. I went to the police, but they couldn't do anything without concrete evidence. They took my statement, but they said there wasn't enough to warrant an investigation. They suggested I get a restraining order, but that wouldn't stop him if he was truly determined. I felt helpless, trapped in my own fear. Then, one evening, I received a package in the mail. It was a small, unmarked box. I hesitated before opening it, my hands trembling. Inside, nestled in a bed of tissue paper, was a single, blood-red rose, and attached to the stem, a small note. I unfolded the note, my heart pounding in my chest. The message was short, but it sent a shiver down my spine. "I'm always watching," it read. That's when I snapped. I couldn't live like this anymore. I couldn't live in constant fear, wondering when he was going to strike. I had to do something. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I started documenting everything. Every time I saw him, every time I felt like I was being followed, every time I received a strange message or package. I took photos, recorded videos, and wrote down detailed descriptions of everything. I also started taking self-defense classes. I wanted to be prepared, just in case. And then I did some digging. I used my, admittedly limited, internet skills to try and find out more about Liam. I searched his name, his address, his social media profiles. That's when I found it. Buried deep in an online forum, I found a post from a woman claiming she had been stalked by a man named Liam. The details were eerily similar to my own experience. The woman described how he had become obsessed with her, how he had followed her, and how he had sent her threatening messages. The post was several years old, but it was enough. I had proof. I took all the evidence I had gathered, the photos, the videos, the messages, the forum post, and went back to the police. This time they listened. They opened an investigation, and within days, they had Liam in custody. They found evidence on his computer confirming he had been stalking me, as well as evidence linking him to other women he had harassed in the past. It turned out Liam had a long history of stalking and harassment. He was a master manipulator, able to charm his way into women's lives before revealing his true, sinister nature. He was eventually charged with stalking, harassment, and several other crimes. He's currently in prison, awaiting trial. I'm still recovering from the experience. I still have nightmares, and I still jump at every sound. But I'm also stronger now. I'm more aware, more cautious, and more determined to protect myself. I learned a valuable lesson from all of this. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't dismiss your fears as paranoia. Listen to your gut and take action. And never, ever underestimate the power of a good self-defense class. I thought I was being paranoid until I found the rose. And that's when I knew I wasn't paranoid. I was right. It's weird how a seemingly normal night can completely shatter your perception of the world. I used to think I was pretty savvy, street smart even. I could navigate public transport at 3 a.m., handle a drunk dude trying to hit on me at a bar, the whole deal. I thought I had a good sense of character, could spot a weirdo from a mile away. Then Liam happened, and now I question everything. It started like any other online dating story, right? I was fresh out of a bad breakup, feeling a little lost and lonely, and decided to give Bumble a try. I'd had some success with it in the past, nothing long-term, but it was a good way to meet new people and distract myself. Liam's profile was appealing. He was conventionally attractive, tall, dark hair, piercing blue eyes, but it was his bio that really caught my attention. He was a writer, loved hiking, and was looking for someone who appreciated deep conversations and spontaneous adventures. It sounded exactly like the kind of guy I usually went for. We matched, and the conversation flowed easily from the start. He was witty, intelligent, and genuinely interested in what I had to say. We talked about books, movies, our travel dreams, everything. There were no red flags, no awkward pauses, just a natural connection that felt really promising. After a week of texting, we decided to meet up. He suggested a small, independent bookstore that also had a cozy cafe. It was the perfect first date spot, thoughtful and low pressure. The date was perfect. Seriously, Liam was even more charming in person. He was attentive, funny, and made me feel completely at ease. We talked for hours, losing track of time as we delved into deeper topics like our fears, our regrets, and our hopes for the future. He seemed to really listen to me, to understand me, and I felt like I could be completely myself around him. I remember thinking, wow, maybe this is it. Maybe I finally found someone who actually gets me. After the bookstore, we walked around the city, hand in hand, exploring hidden alleys and admiring the street art. It felt like something out of a movie. He even surprised me with a single red rose from a flower stand, which, I know, sounds cheesy, but it was incredibly sweet and genuine. By the end of the night, I was completely smitten. We kissed goodnight, and I went home with butterflies in my stomach, already excited for our next date. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of dates. We went hiking in the mountains, explored local museums, cooked dinner at his apartment, and even spent a weekend at a cabin in the woods. Everything felt so easy, so natural. I was falling hard, and I thought he was too. He told me he loved spending time with me, that I was different from anyone he'd ever met, that he could see a real future with me. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. Then things started to shift, subtly at first. He started being less responsive to my texts, canceling dates at the last minute, claiming he was busy or overwhelmed with work. I tried to be understanding, telling myself that everyone goes through periods of stress, but something felt off. He was still affectionate when we did see each other, but there was a distance in his eyes, a hesitation in his touch. One night, we were at his apartment, watching a movie. I could feel the tension in the air, the unspoken words hanging between us. I finally decided to address it. "Liam," I said, gently taking his hand, "is everything okay? You've seemed distant lately." He sighed, avoiding my gaze. "I don't know," he said quietly. "Things have just been complicated." "Complicated how?" I pressed. He hesitated for a moment, then finally looked at me. His eyes filled with a strange mixture of guilt and something else I couldn't quite decipher. "There's something I need to tell you," he said. That's when the bottom dropped out. He confessed that he was still seeing his ex-girlfriend, that they had never really broken up, and that he was torn between us. He said he didn't want to hurt me, that he really cared about me, but that he couldn't just cut her out of his life. I was stunned, betrayed, furious. I couldn't believe he had lied to me, had manipulated me, had made me believe that our connection was real when it was all just a facade. I stood up, tears streaming down my face, and told him that I never wanted to see him again. I stormed out of his apartment, leaving behind my favorite scarf and a piece of my heart. But that wasn't the end of it. Oh no, that was just the beginning of the nightmare. Over the next few weeks, Liam started to obsess. He would text me constantly, begging me to talk to him, to give him another chance. He would call me late at night, leaving rambling voicemails about how much he loved me and how he couldn't live without me. I blocked his number, but he would create new ones, using burner apps and fake accounts. Then he started showing up at my apartment. I would find him waiting outside my building, sometimes for hours, just staring up at my window. I called the police, but they said there was nothing they could do unless he actually threatened me or tried to break in. I felt trapped, terrified, and completely helpless. One evening, I was walking home from work when I noticed someone following me. I glanced back and saw Liam, his face pale and drawn, his eyes filled with a desperate intensity. I started to run, my heart pounding in my chest, but he quickly caught up to me. He grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "Please, just talk to me," he pleaded, his voice trembling. "I need you." "Get away from me," I screamed, trying to pull away. He wouldn't let go. He started saying things, horrible things, about how I was ruining his life, about how he couldn't be happy without me, about how he would do anything to have me back. I was terrified. I thought he was going to hurt me. Just then, a group of people walked by. They saw what was happening and rushed to my aid. They pulled Liam off me, yelling at him to leave me alone. He hesitated for a moment, then finally ran off, disappearing into the crowd. I was shaken but safe. The stranger stayed with me until I got home, making sure I was okay. I thanked him profusely, feeling an overwhelming sense of gratitude and relief. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, replaying the events of the past few weeks in my mind, trying to make sense of it all. How could someone who seemed so perfect, so kind, so genuine turn into someone so dangerous? I realized that I had been blinded by my own desire for connection, for love. I had ignored the subtle red flags, the inconsistencies in his stories, the way he would sometimes look at me with a strange, unsettling intensity. I had wanted to believe in him so badly that I had ignored my own instincts. The next day, I went to the police station and filed a restraining order against Liam. I also installed a security system in my apartment, changed my locks, and started taking self-defense classes. I was determined to protect myself, to regain control of my life. It's been a year since that night, and Liam is still out there. He's violated the restraining order a few times, sending me emails and leaving notes on my car, but he hasn't tried to physically harm me again. I live in a constant state of vigilance, always looking over my shoulder, always prepared for the worst. This experience changed me. It shattered my naivete, my trust in others, and my sense of safety. I used to think that bad things only happened to other people, to people who weren't careful enough. Now I know that danger can lurk anywhere, even behind a charming smile and a well-crafted profile. I'm still dating, but I'm much more cautious now. I take things slowly, pay attention to the red flags, and trust my gut. I've also learned the importance of setting boundaries and enforcing them, no matter how uncomfortable it may feel. I don't know if I'll ever fully recover from what happened with Liam. The trauma still lingers, a constant reminder of the fragility of trust and the darkness that can exist within people. But I'm learning to live with it, to heal, and to build a life that feels safe and secure. I'm sharing my story because I want other women to know that they're not alone, that it's okay to be scared, to be vulnerable, and to ask for help, and that even after the worst experiences, it's possible to find your strength, to reclaim your power, and to rebuild your life. Safety isn't just about locking doors. It's about trusting your intuition and knowing when to walk away, even when it's the hardest thing to do. I met Sarah on a dating app. It was called Linked Hearts, a total ripoff of other apps, but with a promise of matching you with someone based on career aspirations and shared professional goals. At the time, I was a young architect, fresh out of grad school, working long hours at a demanding firm. I barely had time to eat, let alone date, so the app seemed like a streamlined solution. Sarah's profile was impressive. She was a lawyer specializing in environmental law, with a passion for hiking and a witty bio about her obsession with spreadsheets. We matched instantly. Our initial conversations were intelligent and engaging. We debated the merits of sustainable design, shared our frustrations with office politics, and bonded over our mutual love for obscure indie movies. She seemed ambitious, driven, and genuinely interested in my thoughts and ideas. It was refreshing, especially compared to the vapid small talk I had encountered on other dating apps. After a couple of weeks of messaging, we decided to meet in person. We chose a trendy wine bar in the downtown area, a place with exposed brick and soft lighting. Sarah arrived precisely on time, looking even more striking in person than in her profile pictures. She had this intense, focused gaze that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. We talked for hours, effortlessly transitioning from one topic to another. She was opinionated but open-minded, challenging my perspectives in a way that felt stimulating rather than confrontational. The date ended with a lingering hug and a promise to see each other again soon. Over the next few months, Sarah and I became inseparable. We explored the city together, went on weekend hikes, and spent countless nights curled up on my couch, watching movies and talking until sunrise. She integrated seamlessly into my life, becoming friends with my colleagues and charming my family. It felt like I had finally found someone who truly understood me, someone who shared my values and supported my ambitions. But as time went on, I started noticing subtle inconsistencies, small details that didn't quite add up. She was often vague about her past, deflecting questions about her family and childhood with a practiced ease. She claimed to have a close circle of friends, but I never actually met any of them. Whenever I suggested a double date or a group outing, she would politely decline, citing scheduling conflicts or other obligations. Her behavior at work was also increasingly strange. She would disappear for hours at a time, claiming to be in meetings or working on urgent cases, but her explanations always felt hollow. I once tried to surprise her at her office, only to be told by the receptionist that she wasn't in that day, even though Sarah had assured me she would be. I tried to brush these concerns aside, attributing them to stress or overwork. I wanted to believe that Sarah was who she said she was, but the doubts kept gnawing at me. One evening, while Sarah was in the shower, I couldn't resist the urge to snoop. I knew it was wrong, a violation of her privacy, but I needed to know the truth. I started with her purse, rifling through her wallet and her makeup bag. I found nothing out of the ordinary, just the usual assortment of cards, cash, and cosmetics. Then I moved on to her phone. I hesitated for a moment, feeling a wave of guilt wash over me, but the need for answers was too strong to ignore. I picked up her phone and tried to unlock it. She had a passcode, of course, but I knew her birthday and her anniversary date. After a few failed attempts, I tried my own birthday. To my surprise, it worked. The phone unlocked, revealing a pristine home screen with a minimalist layout. I started scrolling through her messages, but they were all work-related emails and texts. There were no personal conversations, no evidence of the close friends she claimed to have. Then I checked her photos. The gallery was filled with pictures of us together, selfies from our dates, and landscapes from our hikes. But there were also a few oddities, images that didn't quite fit. There were pictures of her standing in front of different houses that I had never seen before. There were pictures of her with different groups of people I didn't recognize. And there were pictures of her alone, staring intensely into the camera, with a vacant, almost unsettling expression in her eyes. I continued to dig deeper, searching through her notes and her calendar. I found nothing that shed any light on her secrets, nothing that explained the inconsistencies in her story. Just as I was about to give up, I stumbled upon a hidden folder, cleverly disguised with a generic file name. I opened the folder, and my heart skipped a beat. Inside, there were dozens of documents, each one meticulously organized and labeled. They were background checks, financial records, and personal profiles, all belonging to different men. As I scrolled through the documents, a horrifying realization began to dawn on me. Each of these men shared a common trait. They were all successful professionals, ambitious and driven, just like me. And each of them had disappeared without a trace, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and broken hearts. The realization was like a punch to the gut, leaving me gasping for air. I stumbled back, dropping the phone on the bed, my mind reeling with shock and disbelief. I pieced it together. The Linked Hearts app wasn't just a convenient dating platform. It was a hunting ground. She was meticulously selecting and grooming her victims, building relationships based on lies and manipulation, and then disappearing them. But why? I didn't have an answer. I just knew I had to get out. I quietly gathered my things, trying not to make any noise. I wrote a brief note, telling Sarah that I had to leave unexpectedly and that I would explain everything later. Then, I slipped out of the apartment, leaving her sleeping soundly in the shower. I didn't go home. I checked into a cheap motel on the outskirts of the city, too afraid to return to my apartment. I spent the night tossing and turning, haunted by the images I had seen on her phone. The next morning, I went to the police. I told them everything, showing them the documents I had found on Sarah's phone. They were initially skeptical, dismissing my claims as the ramblings of a jilted lover. But as they delved deeper into the investigation, they began to uncover a disturbing pattern. They found evidence linking Sarah to several missing persons cases, all involving successful professionals who had met her on dating apps. The police launched a nationwide manhunt, but Sarah had vanished without a trace. They searched her apartment, but found nothing to indicate where she had gone. It was as if she had simply ceased to exist. A few weeks later, the police found a burned-out car registered to her in a forest preserve, but no body was ever recovered. The case went cold. I tried to move on with my life, but the experience had left me deeply scarred. I was plagued by nightmares, haunted by the memory of Sarah's vacant stare and the chilling realization that I had been a pawn in her twisted game. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was still out there, watching me, waiting for the right moment to strike. I became withdrawn and paranoid, isolating myself from my friends and family. I quit my job, unable to face the pressures and demands of my career. I moved to a small town, hoping to find some peace and anonymity. But even there, in the quiet solitude of my new life, I couldn't escape the fear. I realized that her ability to seamlessly integrate into my life, to become someone I trusted completely, was not a sign of compatibility, but a tactic. The scariest part wasn't the burned-out car or the missing persons, but realizing that someone could study me, mimic my desires, and become my perfect match, all with the intention of erasing me from existence. Okay, so, let me tell you about this dating experience I had last year. I swear, I still get shivers thinking about it. I'm usually pretty good at reading people, you know. I can spot a weirdo from a mile away, usually. But this guy was different. He was like a master of disguise, hiding his true colors behind a charming facade. I met him on Bumble. His name was Ethan, and his profile was pretty standard. A few photos of him hiking, one with his dog, and a witty bio about enjoying craft beer and live music. Seemed harmless enough. We matched, and he messaged me almost immediately. The conversation flowed easily. He asked thoughtful questions about my life, my interests, and my goals. He even remembered details I had mentioned in passing, which I found impressive. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, which was a refreshing change from the usual dating app interactions. After a few days of chatting, he asked me out. He suggested a local jazz club, which I loved. It felt like a classic, sophisticated date, and I was excited. I got ready, put on a dress I felt good in, and headed out, feeling optimistic. Ethan was already there when I arrived. He stood up as I approached, smiled warmly, and gave me a hug. He looked even better in person than in his photos. He was tall, with dark hair and piercing blue eyes. He had this way of looking at you that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. The date started off great. The jazz music was fantastic, the drinks were strong, and Ethan kept the conversation flowing. He told me about his job as a software engineer, his passion for photography, and his love for traveling. He seemed intelligent, funny, and genuinely kind. I found myself laughing a lot and feeling comfortable around him. As the night progressed, however, things started to get a little off. It started subtly. He began asking more personal questions, delving deeper into my past relationships and my insecurities. He did it in a way that seemed caring, like he was trying to understand me on a deeper level. But it felt a little too intense for a first date. Then he started making comments about how beautiful I was, how he had never met anyone like me, and how he felt an instant connection between us. Again, it seemed flattering at first, but it quickly became overwhelming. He was laying it on way too thick, and it felt insincere. I tried to steer the conversation towards lighter topics, but he kept bringing it back to us, to our connection, to how perfect we were for each other. He started talking about the future, about traveling together, about meeting his family. It was like he was trying to fast forward our relationship at warp speed. I started to feel uncomfortable. I made an excuse to go to the bathroom, and when I got there, I took a deep breath and tried to calm myself down. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe he was just really enthusiastic. But something felt wrong, terribly wrong. When I returned to the table, Ethan was waiting for me, his eyes locked on mine. He reached across the table and took my hand. His grip was surprisingly strong, and his hand was cold and clammy. "I'm so glad you're here," he said, his voice low and intense. "I've been waiting for you my whole life." I tried to smile, but my face felt frozen. I wanted to pull my hand away, but I didn't want to cause a scene. "Ethan," I said, "this is all moving a little fast for me." He chuckled, a low, unsettling sound. "Don't be scared," he said. "We're meant to be together. I know it. You know it." He leaned closer, his face inches from mine. I could smell his breath, which smelled faintly of metal. "I can feel it," he whispered. That was it. I was done. I pulled my hand away and stood up. "I have to go," I said, my voice trembling. "I'm not feeling well." He looked surprised, then angry. "What? Where are you going?" he asked, his voice rising. "I told you, I'm not feeling well," I repeated, backing away. "I'm going home." But we were having such a good time," he protested. "I thought you liked me." I need to go," I stammered. I turned and practically ran out of the jazz club, leaving him sitting there alone. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get them into the ignition. I started the car and sped away, not even looking back. I drove straight home, locked all the doors, and curled up in bed, shaking and crying. I felt violated, like I had just escaped some kind of trap. The next day, I blocked Ethan on Bumble and tried to forget about the whole experience. But he wouldn't let me. He started calling me. My phone rang nonstop with calls from unknown numbers. I blocked each one, but he kept finding new ways to reach me. Then, he started emailing me. Long, rambling emails about how he couldn't live without me, how we were destined to be together, how he knew I was just scared but he would protect me. The emails were increasingly disturbing, filled with obsessive declarations of love and veiled threats. I changed my email address, but he somehow found my new one. I started to feel like I was being stalked. I was afraid to leave my apartment. I jumped at every sound. I felt like I was being watched. One night, I was sitting in my living room, watching TV, when I heard a noise outside my window. I peeked through the curtains and saw someone standing on the sidewalk, staring up at my apartment. It was Ethan. He was just standing there, motionless, his eyes fixed on my window. I screamed and ran to the back of my apartment, locking all the doors and windows. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, Ethan was gone. The police took a report, but they said there wasn't much they could do unless he actually threatened me or broke into my apartment. I felt helpless and terrified. I knew I had to do something. I started researching Ethan online, trying to find out more about him. I discovered that he had a history of stalking and harassment. He had been arrested several times for similar behavior, but he had always managed to avoid serious consequences. I also found out that he had a restraining order against him from a previous girlfriend. I contacted the previous girlfriend, and she confirmed my worst fears. She told me that Ethan was dangerous and that he wouldn't stop until he got what he wanted. She advised me to take the situation seriously and to do everything I could to protect myself. I took her advice to heart. I filed for a restraining order against Ethan, and I hired a private investigator to track his movements. I also installed a security system in my apartment and started carrying pepper spray with me everywhere I went. The restraining order helped a little. Ethan stopped calling and emailing me, but I knew he was still out there, watching. The private investigator confirmed that he was still living in the area and that he had been seen near my apartment on several occasions. I lived in constant fear, knowing that he could strike at any moment. One evening, I was coming home from work when I noticed that my apartment door was slightly ajar. My heart leaped into my throat. I knew he had been inside. I cautiously pushed the door open and stepped inside, my hand gripping the pepper spray in my pocket. The apartment was dark and silent. I slowly made my way through the living room, my senses on high alert. Suddenly, I heard a noise coming from the bedroom. I crept towards the bedroom door and peeked inside. Ethan was standing in the middle of the room, holding a knife. He turned to face me, his eyes filled with a terrifying rage. "I told you we were meant to be together," he said, his voice cold and menacing. "You can't escape me." I screamed and sprayed him with a pepper spray. He screamed in pain and stumbled backwards, dropping the knife. I didn't hesitate. I ran out of the apartment and screamed for help. Neighbors heard my screams and called the police. Ethan was arrested and charged with stalking, harassment, and attempted assault. He was eventually convicted and sentenced to several years in prison. I was finally safe, but the experience left me scarred. I still have nightmares about Ethan, and I still struggle to trust people. I learned a valuable lesson about the dangers of online dating and the importance of trusting my instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't ignore the red flags, no matter how charming the person may seem. Protect yourself, and don't be afraid to seek help if you feel threatened. It's been a long road to recovery, but I'm slowly learning to heal and move on. I'm still cautious about dating, but I refuse to let one bad experience ruin my life. I'm determined to find happiness and love again, but I'll never forget the horrifying experience with Ethan. It serves as a constant reminder to be careful, to trust my gut, and to never underestimate the power of intuition. I hope my story serves as a warning to others and helps them to stay safe in the often dangerous world of online dating. There's some seriously messed up people out there. I'm glad he is behind bars for the crimes he committed. I am thankful I have been able to move on and find happiness with my current partner. I knew she was the one when I met her. There were no red flags at all. I always considered myself pretty level-headed, not one to jump to conclusions or see conspiracies where they didn't exist. I'm a data analyst, for crying out loud. My life revolves around facts and figures. So, when I started feeling like I was being paranoid about my new relationship, I chalked it up to past baggage. I'd had my share of bad dating experiences, the kind that leave you a little jaded, a little hesitant to fully trust again. But then, a series of unsettling events made me realize that my instincts were right all along, and I was very much not being paranoid. It started subtly. Mark and I had met at a coffee shop, both working remotely. He was charming, intelligent, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. We hit it off immediately, and within a week, we were practically inseparable. He was attentive, always remembering small details about my life, and he had this way of making me feel like I was the only woman in the world. Looking back, that should have been a red flag, but at the time, I was just swept up in the romance. The first thing that struck me as odd was how easily he seemed to know my schedule. He'd text me right when I was finishing a meeting, or suggest dinner at my favorite restaurant on a night I'd mentioned I was free. At first, I thought it was just coincidence, or that I was simply talking about my plans more than I realized. But then it started happening more frequently. One Saturday, I decided to go for a hike in a nearby park, a spur-of-the-moment decision I hadn't mentioned to anyone. As I was reaching the trailhead, I saw Mark walking towards me, smiling. "Hey, what a surprise," he said, as if running into me randomly was the most normal thing in the world. "I love this trail. Thought I'd get some fresh air." I forced a smile, trying to shake off the unease that was starting to creep in. "Yeah, it's beautiful here," I said, trying to sound casual. We hiked together, and he was his usual charming self, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. How did he know I was going to be there? I brushed it off, telling myself it was just a coincidence, that maybe he frequented that park often. But the seed of doubt had been planted. Then there were the gifts. Mark was incredibly generous, showering me with thoughtful presents. He'd give me books by my favorite authors, tickets to shows he knew I wanted to see, even a vintage necklace I'd admired in an antique store window. It was all incredibly romantic, but it also felt a little calculated, like he was trying to win me over with material things. One evening, he gave me a beautiful framed print of a painting I'd mentioned in passing that I liked. "I remember you mentioning how much you loved this painting. I was in an antique store a couple of weeks ago, and I immediately thought of you," he explained. "I'm glad you love it," he continued. "This is amazing," I said to him. "I was going to buy a poster of this painting a couple of years ago." "How did you know?" I said in disbelief. "I heard you mention it," he replied. The thing that really bothered me, though, was that the painting was an incredibly rare piece, not something you'd just stumble across in an antique store. I'd only seen it in a museum once, and I knew that prints of it were hard to come by. How did he find one? And why did he have to look so hard? The final straw came when I started noticing things missing from my apartment. Small things, like a tube of lipstick, a scarf, a book. At first, I thought I was just misplacing them, but then I realized that they were disappearing altogether. It was unsettling, like someone was going through my things when I wasn't home. I started to feel like I was being watched. I catch glimpses of someone in the corner of my eye, or hear noises outside my window at night. I dismissed it as paranoia, telling myself I was just being jumpy because of the missing items. But the feeling persisted, growing stronger with each passing day. One afternoon, I was working from home when I heard a noise coming from my bedroom. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I crept towards the door, peering inside. My bedroom window was opened, even though I was sure I had closed it that morning, and there was a faint scent of cologne in the air, a cologne I recognized as Mark's. That's when I realized I wasn't being paranoid. I was being stalked, and the person stalking me was someone I thought I could trust. I didn't confront Mark directly. I was too afraid of what he might do. Instead, I started gathering evidence. I installed security cameras in my apartment, changed my locks, and started documenting every strange occurrence. It didn't take long for the cameras to capture something disturbing. One night, while I was supposedly asleep, the footage showed Mark letting himself into my apartment with a key. He moved silently through the rooms, touching my things, even lying down in my bed. It was horrifying to watch, like a scene from a horror movie. I took the footage to the police, along with all the other evidence I had gathered. They were initially hesitant, dismissing my concerns as the product of an overactive imagination. But when they saw the video, they took me seriously. They launched an investigation, and it didn't take long for them to uncover the truth. Mark wasn't who he said he was. His real name was David, and he had a history of stalking and harassing women. He'd been using a fake name and a fabricated backstory to lure me into a relationship. He had somehow managed to get access to my phone and laptop without me knowing, using a phishing link, so he knew my schedule, my interests, and everything else about my life. He had been watching me for weeks, learning my routines, infiltrating my life. The police found a storage unit filled with my belongings, the missing items from my apartment, as well as photos of me taken without my knowledge. It was a chilling discovery, a testament to how far he was willing to go. David was arrested and charged with stalking and harassment. He's currently awaiting trial, and I'm terrified of what will happen if he gets out. I've moved to a new city, changed my name, and taken every precaution to protect myself. But the fear lingers, a constant reminder of how easily trust can be betrayed. I still struggle with the feeling that I was somehow responsible for what happened, that I should have seen the warning signs, that I should have trusted my instincts sooner. But I know that's not true. David was a master manipulator, a predator who preyed on my vulnerability. I was a victim, and I shouldn't blame myself for what happened. The experience has changed me. I'm more cautious now, more wary of strangers. I don't trust easily, and I'm always on the lookout for red flags. I'm still trying to rebuild my life, to overcome the trauma of what happened. It's a long process, but I'm determined to heal and move forward. I share my story not for sympathy, but to warn others, to remind them that not everyone is who they seem, and that sometimes the person you think you know best is the one you should fear the most. Trust your instincts, no matter how paranoid they may seem, because sometimes paranoia is just your intuition trying to protect you from harm. I hate being single. I always have, and I always will. I hate that feeling when it comes to 10 p.m. on a Saturday night, and you're all alone in your bed wishing you were cuddling with anyone. I work so much of the time that it's hard to meet new people. And when I do meet new people, I'm always wondering if they're dating material or not. It's exhausting, and that's why I turn to dating apps, hoping to find love in a hopeless place. I met Daniel on Hinge. His profile was average, I guess. He had a few pictures, all of him smiling, which I appreciated. He seemed like a normal, well-adjusted guy. We matched, and we started talking. The conversation was easy, effortless even. We had a lot in common. We both liked hiking, trying new restaurants, and binging true crime documentaries. After a week of chatting, we decided to meet up for coffee. I know, coffee is a cliché first date, but I like it. It's low pressure, and if things go south, you can always make a quick escape. I met him at a cute little cafe downtown. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a table by the window. He looked just like his pictures, maybe even better in person. He stood up when he saw me, smiled, and gave me a hug. It was a good hug, not too awkward, not too lingering. We ordered our coffees and sat down to talk. The first hour was great. We talked about our jobs, our families, our hobbies. He was funny, intelligent, and genuinely seemed interested in what I had to say. I was starting to feel like maybe, just maybe, this could be something real. We laughed, we joked, we even had a few moments of genuine connection. I was starting to let my guard down. Then, he asked me about my past relationships. Now, I know that talking about past relationships is a normal part of getting to know someone, but the way he asked the question felt off. He didn't just ask if I had been in any serious relationships. He wanted details. He wanted to know how long they lasted, why they ended, and what my exes were like. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of how much to share. I didn't want to seem closed off, but I also didn't want to overshare and scare him away. I told him about my last serious relationship, which had ended a few years ago. It had been a long-term thing, but we had just grown apart. There was no drama, no cheating, just a slow fade. He listened intently, nodding occasionally, but his eyes never left mine. It was unnerving. Then, he started asking about my ex's physical appearances. He wanted to know their heights, their weights, their hair colors, their eye colors. He even asked about their bra sizes. I was starting to feel really uncomfortable. This wasn't normal first date conversation. I tried to change the subject, but he kept steering it back to my exes. He seemed obsessed with them, like he was trying to compare himself to them. He even started asking if I still talked to them, if I still had feelings for them. I finally had enough. Why are you so interested in my exes? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. He smiled, a strange, unsettling smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I just want to know what you're attracted to," he said. "I want to know what kind of woman you really want." His answer didn't reassure me. It made me feel even more uneasy. I decided it was time to end the date. "I think I should go," I said, standing up. "This isn't really working for me." He stood up too, blocking my path. "Wait," he said. "Don't you want to see if we have a real connection?" "I don't think we do," I said, trying to move past him. He grabbed my arm, his grip tight. "Come on," he said. "Just give me a chance." I yanked my arm away from him. "Let go of me," I said, my voice rising. He didn't let go. He just stared at me, his eyes dark and intense. "You're going to regret this," he said, his voice low and menacing. I was scared, really scared. I didn't know what he was capable of, but I knew I needed to get away from him. I scanned the cafe, looking for someone who could help. Luckily, I caught the eye of the barista behind the counter. I gave her a subtle but desperate look, hoping she would understand. She did. She immediately came over to our table. "Is everything okay here?" she asked, her voice loud and clear. Daniel finally released my arm. "Everything's fine," he said, his smile returning, but it didn't fool me this time. "Are you sure?" the barista asked, looking directly at me. "No," I said. "I want him to leave me alone." The barista stood her ground, her arms crossed. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," she said. "This woman is clearly uncomfortable." Daniel glared at me, then at the barista. He knew he was outnumbered. He muttered something under his breath, and then turned and walked out of the cafe. I thanked the barista profusely. She was a lifesaver. She offered me a free coffee and let me sit at the table until I felt safe enough to leave. I never saw Daniel again, but the experience left me shaken. It made me realize how dangerous dating apps can be. You never really know who you're talking to, and you can never be sure of their intentions. I deleted Hinge that night, and I haven't used a dating app since. It's been a few years since that awful date, and I'm still single. Honestly, I'm okay with it. I'd rather be alone than with someone who makes me feel unsafe or uncomfortable. I've learned to be more cautious, to trust my instincts, and to always prioritize my safety. Maybe someday I'll find love, but until then, I'm happy being my own best company. The worst part is that it was so normal. The first hour was something that I would always expect on a date. It can be something so simple as one question that can ruin everything. I remember going home crying that night because I was scared for my life. I even told my parents about what happened. They were so worried and angry. Looking back, the pictures on his profile may have been subtle red flags. They weren't as clear and high quality as most people's photos. They almost looked like they were trying to hide something. His voice was even deeper and more serious than what I'm used to, but I thought that he was shy. I was wrong. There's so much you don't know about people. I hate the dating scene because it can be a nightmare. It's a bunch of people trying to be someone they're not and trying to show the best version of themselves. Some people even take that way too far, where they aren't themselves at all and are just lying. I wish there was a better way. Okay, so you are not going to believe this. Seriously, I still can't quite wrap my head around it, and I'm the one who lived it. It all started innocently enough, with a dating app, of course. After a particularly rough breakup, my friends convinced me I needed to get back out there. I was hesitant. Dating apps always felt so artificial, like a curated highlight reel of people trying way too hard to impress strangers. But I caved, downloaded Spark Match, and braced myself for the inevitable onslaught of cheesy pickup lines and awkward silences. For the first few weeks, it was exactly as I expected. A parade of superficial profiles and conversations that fizzled out after a few exchanges. Then I matched with him. Liam. His profile was different. No shirtless selfies, no boasts about his six-figure salary, always a red flag, in my opinion. Just a few candid photos of him hiking, playing guitar, and volunteering at an animal shelter. His bio was simple. Looking for someone who appreciates good coffee and even better conversations. Seemed harmless enough. We started chatting, and I was immediately drawn to his intelligence and wit. He wasn't trying to be anything he wasn't. He was genuine, funny, and surprisingly insightful. We talked about everything, our families, our dreams, our fears. It felt easy. Refreshingly so. After a week of nonstop texting, we decided to meet for coffee. Classic, I know. The coffee date went even better than I could have hoped. He was even more charming in person, with kind eyes and a disarming smile. We talked for hours, losing track of time as we delved into deeper and deeper conversations. There was this undeniable connection between us, a spark that I hadn't felt with anyone in a long time. We made plans for a second date before we even left the coffee shop. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. We went on hikes, saw movies, tried new restaurants. Each date was better than the last. I was completely smitten. He seemed perfect, kind, considerate, intelligent, funny, and genuinely interested in getting to know me. My friends were ecstatic. "He's a keeper," they'd say, their eyes sparkling with excitement. I started to believe it too. Maybe, just maybe, I'd finally found someone special. Then things started to get weird. Subtle at first, almost imperceptible. He started being a little possessive, asking about my whereabouts at all times of the day, questioning who I was talking to. It wasn't overtly aggressive, but it was there, lurking beneath the surface. I chalked it up to him being really into me, maybe a little insecure. I'd been in relationships like that before, and I knew how to handle it. Reassure him, make him feel loved and appreciated. But the possessiveness escalated. He started showing up at my work unexpectedly, just to say hi. He'd call me multiple times a day, and if I didn't answer, he'd get agitated. He started subtly isolating me from my friends, making comments about how they were bad influences or how they didn't understand our relationship. I tried to brush it off, but the unease was growing. One night, we were at my apartment watching a movie. I got a text from my friend Sarah, asking if I wanted to grab brunch the next day. I smiled and typed out a quick reply. "Sounds fun. See you tomorrow." Liam, who was sitting next to me, stiffened. "Who's Sarah?" he asked, his voice tight. "Just a friend," I said, trying to sound casual. "Why?" He stared at me, his eyes narrowed. "I just don't like you spending so much time with her. She's always trying to drag you out. We should be spending our time together." I felt a surge of anger. "Liam, she's my friend. I'm allowed to have friends outside of our relationship." He grabbed my hand, his grip surprisingly tight. "I just want you to be happy, and I know I can make you happier than anyone else." His voice was soft, almost pleading, but there was something unsettling in his eyes. "You're suffocating me, Liam," I said, trying to pull my hand away. I need some space." His face hardened. "Space? What do you need space from? From me? Are you saying you don't want to be with me?" "I'm saying you're being controlling, and it's scaring me," I said, my voice trembling. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I'm just trying to protect you," he said, his voice rising. "Protect me? From what? My friends? My life?" I stood up too, my heart pounding in my chest. "I think you should leave." He stared at me for a long moment, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and hurt. Then, without a word, he turned and walked out the door, slamming it behind him. I stood there for a moment, catching my breath, trying to process what had just happened. I felt a strange mix of relief and fear. Relief that I had finally stood up to him. Fear of what he might do next. I didn't hear from him for a few days. I started to relax, thinking maybe he'd finally gotten a message. But then, the messages started. At first, they were just simple texts. "I miss you. I'm sorry. Please talk to me." I ignored them. Then they became more persistent, more desperate. "I can't live without you. You're the only one who understands me. Please give me another chance." I still ignored them. Then they turned dark. "I know where you live. I see you. You can't hide from me." My blood ran cold. This wasn't just possessiveness anymore. This was stalking. This was dangerous. I blocked his number, reported him to the dating app, and told my friends and family everything. They were all incredibly supportive, urging me to go to the police. But I hesitated. I didn't want to overreact. Maybe he was just trying to scare me. Maybe he'd eventually give up and leave me alone. But then, one night, I woke up to a noise outside my window. I peeked through the blinds and saw him, standing across the street, staring up at my apartment, a dark figure silhouetted against the streetlight. He didn't move, didn't say anything. He just stood there, watching. That was the last straw. I called the police. They took my report seriously, promising to increase patrols in my area and investigate. They advised me to get a restraining order, which I did immediately. For the next few weeks, I lived in a state of constant anxiety, jumping at every sound, afraid to leave my apartment. The police were vigilant, but Liam was still out there. Then, one morning, I got a call from the police. They had found him. He had broken into my apartment while I was at work. He was waiting for me when I got home. He said he wanted to talk things out. He was arrested and charged with stalking and trespassing. You'd think that would be the end of the story, that I could finally breathe a sigh of relief and move on with my life. But it wasn't. A few weeks later, I received a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside, there was a single photograph, a picture of me sleeping in my bed, taken through my window. On the back, there was a handwritten message, "I'll always be watching you." I went back to the police, showed them the letter. They were horrified. They launched a full-scale investigation, but they couldn't find any evidence to link Liam to the letter. They suspected he had an accomplice, someone helping him from the outside, but they couldn't prove it. I moved, changed my name, cut off contact with everyone I knew, started a new life in a new city. I still look over my shoulder, still jump at every unexpected noise. The fear is always there, lurking beneath the surface. I don't think it will ever truly go away. So, yeah, that's my dating app horror story. A cautionary tale about the dangers of online dating, about the importance of trusting your instincts, and about the terrifying reality of stalking. You just never know who's behind that charming profile, who's hiding behind that disarming smile. And sometimes, the person you think you're falling in love with is actually the person you should be running from. Believe me, you won't believe what happened to me. It's not worth it. So listen up, because I need to tell someone this, and you're it. I wouldn't wish what happened to me on my worst enemy. And honestly, I'm still trying to process it. It all started, like so many stupid decisions, with a dating app. I'm not going to name it because that's not the point. But let's just say it was one of those find your soulmate types. The kind that promises algorithms and compatibility scores will lead you to everlasting love. I was in my early 30s, recently divorced, and feeling that pressure, the one where everyone around you is settling down, and you're stuck wondering if you missed the boat. So, I made a profile, answered all the questions honestly, and started swiping. I wasn't really expecting anything, but then I matched with Julian. On paper, he was perfect. He was a few years older than me, had a good job, liked hiking, reading, and craft beer, all things I enjoyed. His profile pictures were attractive, but not in a try-hard way, just natural. We started chatting, and he was witty, intelligent, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. No awkward small talk, no creepy pickup lines, just easy conversation. It felt refreshing. After a week of chatting, we decided to meet for coffee. He suggested a local bookstore cafe, which I thought was a great choice. He was even more attractive in person than in his pictures. He had this warm smile and kind eyes, and he was just easy to talk to. We spent hours there, discussing everything from our favorite books to our travel dreams. I left that date feeling like I had finally met someone special, someone who understood me. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. We went on dates almost every night, movies, restaurants, walks in the park. He was always a perfect gentleman, opening doors, paying the bill, and making sure I felt safe and comfortable. He was affectionate, but not pushy, and he always respected my boundaries. I was falling hard and fast. Then came the weekend trip. He suggested we go to a cabin he had rented in the mountains. It sounded romantic, secluded, and exactly what I needed to escape the city for a bit. I hesitated at first, as it felt soon, but he reassured me that he understood if I wasn't comfortable and that we could just spend the weekend hiking and relaxing. I gave in. A part of me wanted a serious relationship, and this felt like a step in that direction. The drive up was beautiful, winding through scenic mountain roads. The cabin was even more charming than I had imagined, nestled deep in the woods, with a cozy fireplace and a stunning view. We spent the afternoon hiking, laughing, and enjoying the crisp mountain air. That evening, we cooked dinner together, drank wine by the fire, and talked for hours. It was perfect, or so I thought. That night, after we went to bed, I woke up to a strange noise. It was faint, almost like a scratching sound, coming from outside the window. I nudged Julian awake, and he said it was probably just an animal. We both tried to ignore it, but the scratching persisted, growing louder and more insistent. It was unnerving. Then came the nightmares. I started having these vivid, disturbing dreams, filled with dark forests, shadowy figures, and a sense of impending doom. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, my heart racing, feeling like something terrible was about to happen. I started getting paranoid. The next day, Julian started acting different. He was distant, irritable, and seemed preoccupied. He kept disappearing for hours at a time, claiming he was going for walks in the woods, but he wouldn't tell me where. He became secretive with his phone. He flinched when I touched him. He also stopped looking me in the eye. I tried to talk to him about it, but he just brushed me off, saying I was being paranoid. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The scratches continued during the night, but I couldn't wake Julian up anymore. That evening, while Julian was out for a walk, I decided to do some snooping. I know it was wrong, but I couldn't help myself. My intuition was screaming at me. I started by looking through his backpack, which he had left in the living room. I found nothing of interest, just hiking gear and a water bottle. Then, I decided to check his phone. I knew his passcode from when I borrowed it once to make a call. I scrolled through his messages, but everything seemed normal, just conversations with friends and family. Then, I opened his photos. At first, it was just the usual stuff, selfies, pictures of landscapes, food pics. But then, I started seeing other photos. Hidden deep in the albums were pictures of me. Pictures taken without my knowledge. Pictures of me sleeping, changing, showering. My stomach dropped. I felt sick, violated, and terrified. Then I saw another album. The photos were of other women. They were taken at different times and places, but they had one thing in common. They were all in similar situations to me, in secluded locations, looking happy and unsuspecting. And then I saw more photos. Some of the women were not alive. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through the images, my mind racing. Who was this man? What was he capable of? How had I been so blind? I didn't know what to do. I wanted to throw up. I began shaking uncontrollably. As soon as that last thought passed, I heard footsteps outside. Julian was back. I quickly put his phone back where I found it, trying to act normal. But my heart was pounding, and I knew he could see the fear in my eyes. He came into the cabin, his face unreadable. He didn't say a word, just looked at me with a cold, empty stare. I knew at that moment that I was in danger. I needed to get out of there. I need to go home, I stammered, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't respond, just continued to stare at me. Please, Julian, I don't feel well. I need to leave, I pleaded, tears welling up in my eyes. He finally spoke, his voice low and menacing. You know too much, he said. I didn't wait to hear another word. I turned and ran, out of the cabin and into the dark, dense woods. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I had to get away from him. The scratching was almost unbearably loud. It sounded like it was right beside me. I could hear him behind me, his footsteps crunching on the leaves. I ran as fast as I could, my lungs burning, my legs aching. I stumbled and fell, scraping my knees and hands, but I kept going. I knew my life depended on it. After what seemed like an eternity, I finally reached the main road. I flagged down a passing car, a family on their way home from a camping trip. I told them what had happened, and they immediately called the police. Julian was arrested a few hours later, back at the cabin. They found evidence linking him to several missing person cases, women who had disappeared under similar circumstances. They searched the surrounding woods and found several shallow graves. He wasn't just a creep, he was a serial killer. I still have to appear in court next week, but they said his arrest has made the case clear. I survived, but I'm forever changed. I struggle with anxiety and PTSD. I have nightmares every night. I'm in therapy, trying to piece my life back together. I'm not sure if I'll ever be able to trust anyone again, let alone date. So please, learn from my mistake. Be careful who you meet online. Do your research. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't ignore the red flags, no matter how charming or perfect someone seems. Your life may depend on it. I never would have imagined Julian capable of anything. He really had me fooled. And if you hear scratching in walls, just run. So I've been on Hinge for what feels like forever. I know. The app designed to be deleted. Blah, blah, blah. But honestly, it's slim pickings out there, and I'm not about to meet the love of my life organically while buying organic kale. So Hinge it is. And for the most part, it's been a wasteland of generic profiles, guys holding fish, and prompts that make me question the collective intelligence of humanity. But then I matched with Liam. Liam was different. Not in a he wears fedoras and quotes Nietzsche kind of different, but in a subtle, almost unsettling way. His profile was minimalist, just a few carefully chosen photos and prompts. He wasn't conventionally attractive, but he had this intense gaze that drew you in. His answers to the prompts were thoughtful, introspective, even a little dark. He wrote about his fascination with forgotten places, his love for old maps, and his belief that everyone has a hidden story worth uncovering. We started chatting, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. He was witty, intelligent, and genuinely interested in what I had to say. Unlike most guys on the app, he didn't bombard me with compliments or try to steer the conversation towards sex. He just listened, asked questions, and shared his own thoughts and experiences. I was intrigued. After a week of nonstop messaging, we decided to meet up. He suggested a small, independent bookstore that stayed open late on weekends. It was the kind of place I loved, filled with the scent of old paper and the hushed whispers of readers. When I saw him waiting inside, I felt a strange mix of excitement and apprehension. He looked even more intense in person. His eyes were a deep, piercing blue, and he had a way of looking at you that made you feel like he was seeing right through you. The date started off well. We browsed the shelves, talking about our favorite authors and books. He recommended a few obscure titles that I'd never heard of, and I was impressed by his knowledge and taste. We grabbed coffee at the bookstore's cafe and continued chatting for hours. He told me about his travels, his passion for history, and his research into local folklore. He was fascinating, engaging, and unlike anyone I'd ever met. But as the night wore on, things started to get weird. He began asking me questions about my past, not in a casual, getting-to-know-you kind of way, but in a probing, almost interrogative way. He wanted to know about my childhood, my family, my past relationships, even my dreams and fears. I tried to deflect some of his questions, but he was persistent, always steering the conversation back to me. He seemed particularly interested in my childhood home. He asked about its location, its layout, and whether I still had any contact with the people who live there now. I found myself becoming increasingly uncomfortable, but I chalked it up to first date jitters and tried to brush it off. But then he said something that really made my skin crawl. "You know," he said, leaning in close, "I feel like I've known you for a long time, like we're connected in some way." I forced a laugh and said, "Well, that's Hinge for you, right? Algorithm magic." But he didn't laugh. He just stared at me with those intense blue eyes and said, "No, it's more than that. I think we were meant to meet." I suddenly felt a strong urge to leave. I made some excuse about having to get up early the next day, and he didn't try to stop me. He just smiled a slow, unsettling smile and said, "I'll be in touch." The next day, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Liam's words kept replaying in my head, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I had revealed too much about myself. I decided to do some digging. I started by Googling his name, but nothing came up. No social media profiles, no news articles, nothing. It was like he didn't exist. That's when I got really freaked out. I went back to Hinge and tried to find his profile, but it was gone. He had unmatched me. I felt a wave of panic wash over me. I had given this guy my number, told him where I lived, and now he had vanished without a trace. Over the next few days, I became increasingly paranoid. I kept looking over my shoulder, wondering if Liam was watching me. I started having trouble sleeping, haunted by nightmares of his intense gaze and unsettling smile. I told a few of my friends about what had happened, but they just dismissed it as a bad date. "He probably just got spooked," they said. "Some guys are weird like that." But I knew it was more than that. I knew that Liam was hiding something, and I was determined to find out what it was. I started by driving past the bookstore where we had met, hoping to catch a glimpse of him, but he was nowhere to be seen. I went inside and asked the employees if they knew him, but they all said they had never seen him before. I felt like I was going crazy. Was I imagining things? Had I just gone on a really weird date with a normal guy? But then I remembered something he had said about his research into local folklore. I decided to visit the local library and see if I could find anything about him there. I spent hours poring over old books and articles, searching for any mention of Liam or anything related to his interests. And that's when I found it. In a dusty old book about local ghost stories, I found a reference to a man named Elias Thorne, who had lived in the area in the late 1800s. Thorne was described as a recluse who was obsessed with the history of the town and was rumored to have practiced dark magic. The description was vague, but something about it felt familiar. I kept digging, and eventually, I found a photograph of Elias Thorne. And that's when the scariest part was realizing that Liam was Elias. He looked exactly the same, except for the clothes. The same intense blue eyes, the same unsettling smile. It couldn't be a coincidence. I was staring at a photograph of a man who had lived over a century ago, and he was the same man I had gone on a date with. I didn't understand how it was possible, but I knew that I had stumbled upon something incredibly dangerous. I immediately went to the police and told them everything. I showed them the photograph, the Hinge messages, everything. But they didn't believe me. They said it was impossible, that I was probably just mistaken. They dismissed me as a crazy woman who had watched too many horror movies. I was on my own. I knew that Liam/Elias was out there, and I knew that he was dangerous. I didn't know what he wanted from me, but I knew that I had to protect myself. I decided to move. I packed my bags, said goodbye to my friends, and left town without telling anyone where I was going. I changed my number, deleted my social media profiles, and tried to erase any trace of my existence. I knew that he could find me if he really wanted to, but I hoped that by disappearing, I could at least buy myself some time. It's been a few years since then, and I still think about Liam/Elias every day. I still have nightmares about his intense gaze and unsettling smile. I don't know what he is or what he wants, but I know that he's out there, somewhere, waiting. And the scariest part is realizing that I swiped right. I invited him into my life, and now I can never truly be free.